Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. In today's video, I'll be making some Halloween cards using Scrapbook.com's spooky paper pad. I know generally it's Christmas in July, but I thought I would do some Halloween cards in July. It's never too early to get started on your holiday cards. For pattern paper, I'll be using Scrapbook.com's Spooky Collection. I'm using the 6x8 size, but it's also available in A2 size. And I love that it includes some cut apart images and sentiments. I'll also be using two of Scrapbook.com's Halloween stamp sets. I have Spooky and Trick or Treat, and I also have the coordinating dies for both of the sets. And the nice thing about the coordinating die sets, there's a die that goes around the images and the sentiments. So let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I will be using some card sketches for inspiration. The first sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 644. And if you're interested in any of the sketches I use in this video, I share all of that information on my coordinating blog post. The link is in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. For my first card, I selected 3 pattern papers for the 3 different strips on the background, layered it on some black cardstock. Then I'll layer it again on some silver holographic paper. And this is from Scrapbook.com's holographic mirror paper pad. You'll only see that tiny bit around the very outside, but it adds a beautiful sparkly shine. The adhesive I'm using is Scrapbook.com's Deluxe Adhesive Roller. I'll layer this background piece on some white cardstock. Then I'll add my card front onto a card base. Now you could just put that front panel directly onto the white card base, but I decided to add it on some white cardstock since I am leaving a wider white border around it. It just gives that card a little more stability. For a sentiment, I've already stamped Boo, and the O's are 2 little ghosts. I stamped this sentiment on some of the yellow solid pattern paper that's included in the spooky paper pad. I'll cut a fishtail on the right side, then I'll layer this sentiment on some black cardstock. And I did cut that cardstock piece just a little bit bigger. That way I have enough of an area to cut the fishtail on the right side, and I'm also leaving that very wide matted layer. It'll help the sentiment stand out against the background. Now I'll flip it over, and I will be popping it up with some foam dimension, using Scrapbook.com's 1/4 inch foam in the 1mm thickness. And the scissors I use to cut the foam are EK Tools. They have a non-stick finish, so it's perfect for cutting adhesives. I also stamped the sentiment Happy Halloween and cut it out using the coordinating die. I'll be adding the Happy Halloween sentiment underneath the word Boo, and part of it will be going off of the banner. So on the back side of the Happy Halloween sentiment piece, I did add a very narrow scrap piece of pattern paper, and I'll also add just a tiny piece of foam, and I'm only putting it on the lower portion since the top area of the sentiment will be adhered onto the yellow banner. And in that area, I'm using Scrapbook.com's Artiste Glue. For embellishments, I'm using Scrapbook.com's Pops of Color. This is the glossy black color. I'll put 2 drops in the upper left-hand corner and 3 in the lower right-hand corner underneath the Happy Halloween sentiment. And I was struggling a little bit with the Pops of Color, which I was surprised because I did make a second card and I didn't have any issues. Once I finished this card, I was looking at the tip and it had a little bit of plastic on it, so that's why the drops weren't coming out nice and circular. I like to flatten the drops, so I tap the card gently against the edge of one of Scrapbook.com's stack and sort trays. For card design number 2, the card sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 310. I selected 3 pattern papers. For the very background, it's white with pink and orange pumpkins. It has happy Halloween banners. There's bats and stars. Really fun design. For the rectangle piece on the left side, I'm using one of the solid pink pattern papers, and I did cut a fishtail at the bottom, so now I have a large banner. I'll adhere it on the left side of the card, then layer the background on some black cardstock. The background pattern paper piece is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and the black layer is an additional 1/4 of an inch, so it's a full A2 size. 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. For the smaller rectangle panel, I'm using the orange and white moon and star pattern paper, and I layered it on some more black cardstock. I'll put some of the deluxe adhesive on the back and adhere that piece toward the top of the card. This card will be featuring one of the cut-aparts that's included in the paper pad, 2 fun jack-o'-lanterns. I love that they included lots of pink in this paper collection. I'm adding one of the narrow scrap pieces of pattern paper on the inside of the card just for a little extra detail. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut out Trick or Treat, and I also stamped and cut out 3 bats, and I use both of the Halloween stamp sets that I showed earlier in the video. I use black ink for the sentiment and also the bats. I'm adding this sentiment in the upper left-hand corner of the cut-apart image. Part of it will be going off of that cut-apart area, and I will be popping up the left side with foam dimension. On the right side, I'm adding some small scrap pieces of pattern paper and also cardstock. The foam dimension I use is Scrapbook.com's small foam squares in the 1 millimeter thickness. Now I'll flip over the 3 bats, put foam dimension on the back, using more of the small foam squares. I'll add 2 of the bats on the left side and 1 above the cut-apart image and on the right side of the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For card design number 3, the card sketch is from OWH. This is number 200. For the background of my card, using more of the pink solid pattern paper, but I'll be turning this paper into a polka dot design using Scrapbook.com's RUB-ONS transfers. This is the polka dots black and white set. I cut 2 narrow strips, just big enough to cover the areas of that pink paper that'll be visible on the card. I'll start with the wider strip, and this will be on the bottom of the card. And I'll be transferring the image using the popsicle stick that's included in the RUB-ON pack. You can also use your die cut machine, and I have showed that in a previous video. But I thought this time I would just simply use the popsicle stick. It doesn't really take that long. After finishing the wider strip on the bottom of the card, I'll now add the narrow strip at the top. And I'll just gently rub on the transfer, and I'll slowly pull up that plastic backing, making sure all of the image has transferred onto the paper. Now I'll flip over this panel, put some adhesive on the back. Although I should have waited before adding adhesive on the back, since I still want to add some other panels on the front. For the wider strip, I'm using the black paper with the white spider webs. And for that 1/4 inch narrow strip, I'm using the solid orange pattern paper. I'll add both of these on some of the silver holographic paper. This one has a fun star design, so it's super sparkly. I'll adhere the spider web panel down first. To attach the narrow orange strip, I'm putting some double-sided adhesive tape on the back. This is the 1/8 inch width, and it's from Scrapbook.com. I'll remove the release paper and adhere it right above the spider web panel. And I did need to trim off the very right side since I didn't have all of those pieces cut exactly the same length. And now I'm completely forgetting a step. I put adhesive on the back and I'm adhering that panel on the front of the card, and then realized I wanted to layer that piece on some black cardstock. That way it has more contrast against the background. Luckily I was able to remove it. Now I'll layer that piece on the black cardstock, put more adhesive on the back, and adhere it on the front of the card. And I will need to trim the very right side again since I have a little bit of overhang of the black cardstock. Now I'll add this piece on some black cardstock. Put adhesive on the back and add my card front onto a card base. For the image panel, that large rectangle on the left side of the card, I'll be featuring one of the pattern papers. Lots of cheerful jack-o'-lanterns in orange and pink. I'll layer the pattern paper piece on black cardstock, and before I adhere it down, I will add some scrap cardstock pieces above and below where it goes over all those other layers. Just need some narrow strips at the very top and a little wider strip at the bottom. And I will add 2 pieces of cardstock. It's not quite thick enough that it needs foam dimension, so the cardstock pieces are fine. Now I'll put adhesive on the back and add the fun jack-o'-lantern image on the left side of the card. In one of the corners I didn't get any adhesive, so I did add a small drop of Artiste glue. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut out Happy Halloween. Using the outline die, I cut out a second piece from the solid orange pattern paper. And I'll be layering the 2 pieces together, creating a drop shadow of the orange color on the left side and underneath the sentiment. I will pop up the sentiment using more foam dimension. This is the 1/4 inch foam in the 1 millimeter thickness. I'll add 2 strips of foam, remove the release paper, then adhere the sentiment on the right side of the card. For a final finishing touch, I stamped the little twinkle star image. There's 2 little twinkle stars and a tiny circle. The ink color I used is Quartz by Catherine Pooler. I used the coordinating die to cut out that tiny image, and I will pop it up with a small foam square. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 3. For card design number 4, I have the orange pattern paper with white moons and stars and other little sparkles. I'm adding a little extra color around the outside edge of this panel using Distress Oxide Rusty Hinge ink color. And I have Scrapbook.com's small blending brush. The mat I used is Waffle Flowers Mini Stencil Mat. I'll be adding a narrow strip of black cardstock. This is about 1/4 of an inch. Put some double-sided adhesive tape on the back. This is Scrapbook.com's 1/8 inch roll. But before I add that strip, I'll first layer the background pattern paper piece on some black cardstock. The pattern paper panel is 5 1/4 of an inch by 4 inches, and the black cardstock layer is an additional 1/8 of an inch. So 5 3/8 of an inch by 4 1/8 of an inch. I'll put adhesive on the back, add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Now I'll remove the release paper and add the narrow strip of black cardstock toward the bottom of the card, about 1/2 inch up from the very bottom. Using Scrapbook.com's Halloween Bats die set, I selected the 3 smallest size bats, and I cut them out from Scrapbook.com's heavyweight mixed media paper pad. I'm using the black color. For a little extra detail on the bats, I thought I would try out Ranger's brand new Distress Spritz. I'm using the Fossilized amber color, which really does have a very pretty gold look to it. I made sure to shake that bottle so all of the solution mixed. Then I spritzed the 3 bat die cuts, and I did 2 sprays to get nice even coverage. You can still see some of the black cardstock, but now the bats are covered in this beautiful gold shimmer. I did let them dry completely. Not always good about that. For a sentiment, I'm adding Happy Spooky Season. I've already stamped and cut this out. I put Artiste glue on the back and added the sentiment in the lower left-hand corner. For the 3 bats, I will be popping them up using more foam dimension. For the larger bat, I'm using the large foam squares, and for the 2 smaller bats, I'm using the small foam squares. And these are all the 1 millimeter thickness. To get behind the wings of the smallest bat, I did need to cut one of the foam squares in half. Now remove the release paper, add the largest bat on the left side, putting it right above the sentiment. Then I'll add the medium-sized bat on the right side of the sentiment, and then finally the smallest bat. I didn't add any foam at the very end of their wings. That way I can pull them up slightly for a little extra dimension. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. Now here's another look at the 8 Halloween cards I made using Scrapbook.com's spooky pattern paper, along with an assortment of their stamp and die sets. It's only July, but it's never too early to get started on Halloween cards. I give cards to the residents at a nearby retirement home for all of the holidays, so I'm trying really hard this year to get way ahead. Currently, I already have all of my Halloween cards made, so everything that I'm making from here on out will be for next year. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links in the description box below. And I've also added a link for Scrapbook.com's current deals. They always have new freebies and new items on sale, so definitely check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.